What if I told you that the person sleeping beside you every night could be planning your murder? 6:15 in the morning, November 9th, 2005. A 911 call pierces the quiet dawn of Robinson, Texas. The voice on the line belongs to a woman who claims she's just discovered her husband's lifeless body. But here's what will chill you to the bone. Within 7 minutes of arriving at the scene, police officers knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. This is the story of Darlene Gentry, beauty queen, nurse, mother of three, and quite possibly a cold-blooded killer who executed her husband while he slept, then tried to blame it on phantom intruders. But the most shocking part? His own family defended her, until they couldn't anymore. Welcome to The Untold Trace. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a case that proves sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers in the night. It comes from the person sharing your pillow. Let me paint you a picture of small-town Texas in the 1990s. Cameron, Texas. Population, barely 6,000. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, and Friday night football is practically a religion. And there she was, Darlene DeScottsel, born November 2nd, 1974. The middle daughter in a tight-knit family. But Darlene? She wasn't just another girl from Cameron. No, no, no. This young woman had something special. Her classmates called her the Texas Beauty Queen. Not officially crowned, but universally recognized. Blonde hair that caught the sunlight like spun gold. A smile that could light up an entire room. Homecoming queen, Flag Corps member. The girl everyone wanted to be friends with. But here's what made Darlene different. She wasn't just beauty without substance. She was driven, ambitious. After graduating from Yo High School in Cameron in 1993, she enrolled at Texas State Technical College in Waco, pursuing her dream of becoming a nurse. Though she started in dental assistance, her sights were set higher. And that's where fate intervened. Keith Gentry, born September 2nd, 1974, in Waco. The son of Wayman and Glenda Gentry, Keith grew up in Robinson, where family and community still meant something real. He wasn't the flashy type. No, Keith was the dependable one, the guy who showed up, did the work, and didn't complain. At Robinson High School, he was known for his quiet strength and easygoing personality. At Texas State Technical College, studying drafting and welding, Keith met Darlene. And from that moment, lightning in a bottle, the chemistry between them was undeniable. Her family embraced him. His family adored her. Everyone assumed wedding bells were just around the corner. But then, reality hit. After graduation in 1997, Darlene wanted marriage. Keith? He wasn't ready. After honest conversations that left both of them heartbroken, they made the painful decision to separate. Darlene moved to Dallas, returning to dental work, trying to forget the man she loved. But the big city life didn't suit her. After her car was stolen and the fast pace wore her down, she returned home after about a year. And guess what was waiting for her? Keith. Still in Robinson, still thinking about her. Their reunion was swift and certain. In 1999, Keith proposed. This time, there was no hesitation. They married soon after, in what Darlene herself described as a typical Texas wedding, barbecue and dancing. It was a good time. The couple bought their first home in Robinson, right next door to Keith's parents. Keith secured a steady job as an engineering assistant at the local electric utility company. Darlene went back to school, determined to finally achieve her nursing degree. Keith supported her completely, proud to see his wife pursuing her dreams. By all accounts, they were happy. They laughed together, shared responsibilities, embraced their roles as partners in life. And then came the babies. Chase in 2001, Cody in 2004, and finally in 2005, their third son, Cade. The Gentrys seemed to have it all. 3 beautiful boys, 2 stable incomes, a home filled with love. They were the family others looked up to, the ones who made it look easy. But beneath that picture-perfect surface, something was rotting. Here's what nobody saw coming. The very job that provided for their family was destroying their marriage. Keith's position required frequent travel, leaving Darlene alone to manage 3 young boys, a demanding nursing career, and an entire household. Even when Keith was home, he was exhausted from the road. The balance never shifted. Recognizing the strain on his marriage, Keith made a sacrifice. He left his better-paying, travel-heavy position for a lower-paid desk job that would keep him close to home. It was a move born from love, but it came at a brutal cost. The reduction in income strained their finances. Keith began to feel trapped in a job he found mind-numbingly dull. He missed the challenge, the momentum. Frustration took hold like a vice grip. And here's where things get messy. According to those close to the couple, Darlene's spending habits didn't change. She maintained their pristine home, hosted gatherings, continued buying things they could no longer afford. Their arguments grew louder, more frequent, always centered around one thing: money. Keith felt she was careless. Resentment built as more childcare responsibilities fell on him and his parents. Friends and relatives began noticing the tension. The once happy couple now seemed distant, strained, on edge. But here's the thing nobody expected. Despite the problems, there was no talk of divorce. Keith, in particular, seemed determined to hold everything together. For his boys, for his vows, for the life they'd built. And then came November 9th, 2005, the day everything shattered. 6:11 in the morning. Darlene's voice trembles through the emergency line. I got up this morning. I was in my son's room because they didn't sleep. My back door was open. My husband's guns are all gone. And, there's blood on the bed, and he is gurgling. He has pink foam coming out of his mouth, and he's making a god-awful sound. Officers arrived within 3 minutes. What they found was a scene that would haunt them forever. Keith Gentry, 31 years old, lay unconscious in his bed, a gunshot wound to the head. Pink foam, a sign of severe pulmonary trauma, bubbled from his mouth. He was barely breathing. The back door stood open. The gun cabinet in the living room appeared ransacked, several firearms missing. Paramedics rushed Keith to Hillcrest Baptist Medical Center in Waco. He was placed on life support, but the damage was catastrophic. 2 days later, on November 11th, 2005, Keith Gentry was pronounced dead, never having regained consciousness. A homicide investigation was now underway, and the only other adult in the home that night, Darlene. Her story was this. The evening of November 8th had been uneventful. She'd gone out for dinner and drinks with friends, returning around 8:30 p.m. But Keith was upset. He'd found a restaurant receipt, yet another expense he viewed as irresponsible given their financial struggles. They argued. She left to cool off, driving around. When she returned later, she apologized. Keith went to bed in the master bedroom. She stayed with their 3 sons in another room because their youngest, only 18 months old, was fussy and wouldn't sleep. She claimed she woke briefly around 5:15 a.m. when their dog barked, but thought nothing of it. Around 6 a.m., she got up to wake Keith for work. That's when she found him, unresponsive, bleeding, barely alive. The back door open. The gun cabinet violated. Someone, she insisted, had broken into their home during the night, murdered her husband, and stolen firearms. But detectives? They weren't buying it. Within 7 minutes of arriving at the scene, officers knew Darlene's story didn't add up. Let me show you why. First, the timing. Darlene claimed she didn't check on Keith until 6 a.m., but forensic analysis suggested the shooting occurred much earlier, possibly hours before. The blood pooling, the trajectory of the bullet, Keith's medical condition, all pointed to an attack that would have been difficult, if not impossible, to sleep through in the same house. Second, the guns. While Darlene claimed multiple firearms were missing, investigators found several stacked neatly just outside the back door. Not thrown, not scattered, carefully placed. This wasn't the work of a panicked burglar. This was staging. Third, the gun cabinet. Only 2 people had access to it and knew where the key was hidden: Keith and Darlene. A random intruder wouldn't have such specific knowledge about the home's security. Fourth, her behavior. Darlene was a trained nurse. She had the skills and presence of mind to administer CPR or check for signs of life. But she didn't. When paramedics arrived, she hadn't attempted to help Keith. She stayed locked in the children's room, claiming fear for their safety. And fifth, the 911 call itself. Rather than frantic panic, Darlene's voice was remarkably composed. She spoke clearly, offering a detailed timeline of her actions. Her tone sounded more like someone constructing an alibi than someone in crisis. Later that morning, detectives brought Darlene in for questioning. But the moment questions became direct, she invoked her Fifth Amendment right and asked for a lawyer. The interview stopped cold. Still, investigators needed hard evidence. With Darlene's consent, they searched the home again, and buried deep in the kitchen trash can, they found it. A pair of latex gloves containing a single .22 caliber shell casing, traces of gunshot residue, and DNA from only two people, Keith and Darlene. Then came the possible motive. Keith had a life insurance policy worth between $500,000 and $750,000. For someone drowning in debt, that's a powerful incentive. 19 days after the shooting, on November 28, 2005, Darlene Gentry was arrested and charged with murder. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Keith's own parents, Wayman and Glenda Gentry, posted her $50,000 bond. They refused to believe Darlene could be capable of murdering their son. They stood by her, unwavering. She was family, the mother of their grandchildren, someone they trusted and loved. They had no idea what was about to unfold. Not long after her release on bail, Darlene contacted a local acquaintance named Robert Pavelka. She expressed interest in purchasing a piece of rural property near Axtell, Texas. The land featured a serene pond, and Darlene told Pavelka it reminded her of Keith's dream to take their sons fishing. A touching sentiment that seemed genuine. But then, just weeks later, everything changed. Darlene called Pavelka with a bizarre request. She wanted the pond filled in, completely, gone. Pavelka was stunned. Just weeks earlier, she'd been enthusiastic about the water feature, seeing it as a tribute to Keith's memory. Now she wanted it eliminated. Something felt very, very wrong. Pavelka contacted authorities. Detectives immediately understood. If Darlene wanted that pond filled so badly, perhaps it was because it concealed something she desperately needed to stay hidden. A dive team was dispatched. Within 10 to 15 minutes of entering the water, they found it. A .22 caliber revolver. The murder weapon. The same gun Keith's father had given him. But investigators wanted more. They needed undeniable proof of Darlene's consciousness of guilt. So they set a trap. Pavelka called Darlene, playing along with her request. He told her he was preparing to fill the pond, but first he needed to drain it. Police were banking on one thing. If Darlene knew the pond might be emptied, she'd panic and try to retrieve the evidence. She took the bait. The next day, under the watchful eyes of hidden surveillance cameras, Darlene arrived at the property. Wearing wading boots and carrying a pole, she stepped into the water and began systematically probing the pond bed, at the exact spot where authorities had already recovered the gun. Every second was recorded, every movement captured on video. Game over. In February 2007, Darlene Gentry, 32 years old, stood trial in McLennan County, Texas. The trial lasted 5 days. She faced a charge of first-degree murder for shooting her husband while he slept. The prosecution's case was devastating. The surveillance footage of Darlene in the pond, desperately searching for the murder weapon she'd thrown there, was the centerpiece. The gloves in the trash, the staged burglary, the conflicting timeline, the life insurance motive. All of it pointed to one inescapable conclusion. Her defense team chose not to call any witnesses during the guilt-innocence phase. They relied on cross-examinations and procedural arguments, but the evidence was overwhelming. On February 8, 2007, the verdict was delivered. Guilty of first-degree murder, Darlene Gentry was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Keith's family, the same family who had posted her bond, who had stood by her side, who had defended her innocence, watched the surveillance footage in court. They watched their daughter-in-law wade into that pond, searching for the gun she'd used to murder their son. The realization was crushing, the betrayal absolute. Prosecutors argued that Darlene's motive was both emotional and financial. She wanted out of her marriage, she wanted freedom, and she wanted the substantial payout from Keith's life insurance policy. Darlene Gentry is currently serving her sentence at the Dr. Lane Murray Unit in Gatesville, Texas. In November 2017, The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied her request for a new trial. Her conviction remains intact. According to official records, she will be eligible for parole in February 2037. If parole is denied, she will serve her full sentence until February 2067. She has always maintained her innocence, but the consequences of that November morning extend far beyond prison walls. In 2010, a judge granted permanent custody of Chase, Cody, and Cade to Keith's parents, Waymon and Glenda. A restraining order was issued, prohibiting Darlene from having any contact with her sons. According to court documents, she hasn't spoken to them since. 3 boys grew up without their father, without their mother, raised by grandparents carrying the weight of an unimaginable tragedy. Keith Gentry was a man defined by quiet strength, a devoted father who sacrificed a lucrative career to be present for his children. A loyal husband who tried to hold his marriage together even when it was crumbling. A hardworking provider who chose family over ambition. He left behind 3 young boys, a grieving family, and a legacy built on integrity and love. Though his life was tragically cut short at just 31 years old, those who knew Keith remember him not for how he died, but for how he lived. His memory endures in the hearts of his family, his friends, and especially in the lives of the sons he loved more than anything in the world. The case of Darlene and Keith Gentry raises questions that haunt us all. How well do we really know the people we love? What drives someone to cross that final, irreversible line? And can we ever truly see danger when it's wearing a familiar face? In Robinson, Texas, a community learned the hardest lesson imaginable. Sometimes the greatest threat doesn't come from strangers breaking through windows in the dead of night. Sometimes it comes from the person sleeping right beside you. Thank you for joining me on The Untold Trace. If this case moved you, please subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and remember, every case has an untold trace.